All right, man, peace. You know, it's so interesting with the way that the media chooses to cover LeBron James. I'm on record as stating that I believe that this is the best that he's ever played offensively. But when it comes to defense, he's probably one of the worst players in the NBA defensively one-on-one, because he's gone about bulking himself up so much over the last few years. And then he refuses to want to play the 4 spot. He wants to be a 3. So because of that, you always need a 4 and a 5 out there on the court with him. And what that does is that debilitates his team defensively, because he always wants to hide on defense. So now you have a 3, 4, and 5 man that cannot guard 1s and 2s. And when they play elite teams with great backcourts, they struggle because LeBron can no longer guard his man. So they have to create or try to concoct these pseudo-intricate defenses where they try to act as if they're switching or hiding zone defenses, just so that LeBron can float around the painted area and act as if he's a help defender. And every once in a while, when he wants to be, he can be a very good help defender. But for the most part, the Cleveland Cavaliers' defensive scheme is based around trying to hide LeBron and conserve his energy defensively. I say all that because the media has gone to such great lengths to talk about how great LeBron James is and he's better than Jordan, blah, blah, blah. Well, what made Jordan great was that he was the best player in the NBA offensively, and he was one of the top 5 players in the league defensively every year, regardless of position. I would say from the 1986-87 season all the way until Jordan's last year with the Bulls, he was most likely anywhere from number 1 to no lower than maybe number 8 or 9th in the league in regards to importance on defense, potency on defense. In the late 80s, if you were to construct a list of the best defensive players in the NBA, Jordan's name would be on it, along with Akeem, Alvin Robertson. Later on in the 80s, Dennis Rodman, Joe Dumars. Throughout the 90s, Scottie Pippen. And of course, Jordan was still there, even into 98. So when you factor in the notion that Michael Jordan averaged 30 points a game, and then he was always elite on the defensive end until he pretty much ended his career in Chicago. And even in Washington, he was a great defensive player. LeBron James is one of the worst defensive players in the NBA when you look at the metrics, bottom line. And that does take away from his overall caliber as a player. And Isiah Thomas is going to touch on this, but as usual, when people start to criticize LeBron James, they don't name his name. But when they're ready to extol him, they want to proclaim his name from a mountaintop. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
Zeke, help me understand the Cavaliers' defensive philosophy tonight. They switched everything, on-ball screens, off-ball screens, just movement off the ball, and it led to a lot of bad mismatches for them.
Well, I'll explain it to you, sir. The Cleveland Cavaliers' defensive scheme is based around one thing: hiding LeBron. That's all it's about. That's why they do all the switching, because they do not want LeBron James to be having to try to guard Kevin Durant one-on-one. They need him to do too much offensively because they only run the LeBron James system. They totally marginalize every other component of the team. Now LeBron, to his credit, came out in Game 2 and adjusted to the greater effort that the Warriors were exerting on the defensive end. A lot of the trickier schemes, they were switching up their looks for LeBron, and he was moving the ball, he was passing the ball. But because his teammates are so unaccustomed to getting the basketball in certain spots or early in the shot clock, for the most part, they don't know what to do with it. So LeBron is able to pile up the assists, but they're never going to beat a great team like the Warriors. And down the stretch of the game in the fourth quarter, LeBron is going to wear out. Even when we go back to Game 1, one of the main reasons why LeBron had 51 points, even though it was a phenomenal performance offensively, was because the Warriors pretty much were just going through the motions. It reminded me a lot of the 1998 season in the playoffs when the Bulls faced the Indiana Pacers in the conference finals. And the Pacers were a very, very big, strong, tough, bruising team with a very physical front line. The Bulls were able to defeat them in 7 games, and when they got to the finals, they faced the Utah Jazz, who were a very, very tough team in their own right, but in a different way. They were a team that based their success on execution and making sure that they had great mental stamina. That was right up the Bulls' alley. That series really should have been a sweep, because as I stated in another video, the Bulls had Game 1 in the bag, and due to some mental errors by Michael Jordan in certain clutch moments in the game where he allowed the shot clock to expire a couple times. Despite him being the reason that they were leading in the first place, they lost that game. They won games 2, 3, and 4. And then game 5 in Chicago, Karl Malone shot the lights out and Jordan shot poorly, which built up to the classic game 6 in which Michael Jordan hit the game-winning shot. But that series could have easily been a sweep because, as I stated, they were up 3-1 and they should have won game 1. The reason why I bring that up is because the Warriors this season, they also had a 7-game series in the conference finals against a very physical team, and now they're in the finals, and you can see the difference in how relaxed they are because they're back to their free-flowing offense to the point where they were almost overpassing in the second and third quarter of game 2, and it allowed Cleveland to stay in the game because they were passing the ball too damn much.
Just for them defensively.
You know, Matt, sometimes we always talk about, or we'll talk about selfish players, and we only think of selfishness in terms of offense. I thought what I saw tonight was the Cavaliers were selfish defensively. That meant
Which Cavaliers were selfish defensively, Isiah Thomas? Name names, sir.
That meant that they were only concerned about their man. Even when they would switch, right? They switched selfishly to take themselves out of the play, not to necessarily be a part of the play.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting assessment. I need to know who you're talking about, Isiah Thomas. I'm sure that you're not talking about George Hill, because George Hill spent most of the night being switched onto Kevin Durant, and he did his best to guard Kevin Durant. Are you talking about J.R. Smith?
Play defensively. I thought everyone was kind of protecting their turf and playing for the stat sheet tonight.
Well, who could be playing for the stat sheet? Who could this be that Isiah Thomas is talking about that plays for the stat sheet? It can't be J.R. Smith. It can't be George Hill, because their contribution to the team is not predicated on stats. So who are you talking about, Isiah Thomas?
To basically say, it's not my fault.
Now, where have we heard this before? Which player have we heard this sentiment broached before? That he wants to make sure that he covers his own ass, that he has great stats, so that at the end of the series, when they lose, they could say it's not my fault. Who could it possibly be that will be confronted with blame at the end of a series where he would be forced to create a defense mechanism so that he can concoct a platform where he could say it's not my fault we lost because I did this, and that, and I was not getting lit up on the defensive end? Who could he be talking about?
And when I watch them, and this is what I...
There goes LeBron getting blown by. J.R. Smith actually comes to help him. So we know it can't be talking about J.R. Smith because J.R. Smith was trying to help out LeBron.
This is what I mean. You see, there's help, but then there's no helping the helper. When you go to help, there's got to be your teammate that helps the helper. So you give up layups, you give up missed shots, rotation, all of those things come into play. And again, there's the drive, there's the kick out, easy shot, easy baskets. I thought a lot of times they left Kevin Love out on the island by himself.
Okay, so now we've eliminated Kevin Love because Isiah Thomas has stated that he feels like they left Kevin Love out there on an island by himself. He can't be talking about George Hill because George Hill spent most of the night getting roasted by Kevin Durant. So he can only be talking about a couple of guys. He's either talking about J.R. Smith or he's talking about LeBron. Now, is J.R. Smith someone who's going to say, I wanted to make sure that I did this, and that on defense so that they wouldn't try to blame me? That ship has pretty much sailed.
Guarding Steph Curry.
And Thompson.
Okay, so now we mentioned Thompson. So now we know he's not talking about Tristan Thompson. We know that he's not talking about Kevin Love.
And what Curry figured out early was that, okay, those guys can't stay with me in movement. So he'll make a move on a dribble, and then he'll pass the basketball, and then he will cut really quick.
Absolutely, that's modus operandi for their team. Curry comes out, gets the ball, goes to his legs a few times, especially when he's guarded by a big man, then he will pass off and he'll quickly cut to the baseline to try to get an open three, knowing that there's no big man in the league that can chase him like that.
Quick. And consequently, the big now has to stay with a small while he's cutting and moving. And Curry was able to really exploit that.
Absolutely. But if you're Ty Lue, I'm sure that if Isiah Thomas can see that, you can see that. So why would you allow your defense to constantly be prone to that level of offensive execution unless you're trying to hide someone defensively?
Yeah, it was interesting.
I mean, let's think about this for a moment. LeBron James is supposed to be some elite defensive player. But you want Kevin Love out there guarding Steph Curry on an island. You want Tristan Thompson out there guarding Steph Curry on an island, as opposed to having George Hill or J.R. Smith out there. But you have to allow them to switch because you're hiding LeBron in the paint because he's playing quote-unquote free safety.
It's interesting because you had Love and Thompson stuck on Steph Curry at times, and the opposite
all the
was
time.
true. Well, a lot
All
of
the
time.
time.
And the opposite was true, especially early in the game where you had guys like George Hill trying to deal with JaVale McGee when he's under the rim already.
Yeah, you know.
So we've eliminated George Hill. As I've stated, Isiah Thomas could not have been talking about George Hill because George Hill was guarding big men the whole night, including Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I mean, I don't recall Cleveland switching this much. You know, it's almost like they watched Houston and they felt like we're going to try to do that because they became stagnant when they played Houston. Exactly. But to Isaiah's point, you know, look, a lot of those plays, you just can't diagram that defensively. The way the Warriors move the ball, they don't have sets so much. They just kind of pass and cut and move and have principles. So a lot of that you can't diagram from the bench. You just have to, it has to be effort. It has to be willing to trust one another and be there for one another and be connected. And I didn't see that connectivity as Isiah talked about.
Well, you're not going to see that connectivity when LeBron's teammates know why they're playing defense in the way that they're playing it. As a matter of fact, after the game, Tristan Thompson was on record as stating that they were not invested defensively. So who was he talking about? I believe that a lot of dirt is going to come out from LeBron's teammates in regards to how they truly view him after he's gone. I'm sure that they're grateful towards him for carrying them to the finals all these years, but I think that, you know, there's a trade-off there. And there's no doubt about that in my mind, that there's a trade-off where his teammates view him as this uber-talented individual who oftentimes allows his own hubris to shortchange him when he gets to that ultimate moment where he can truly define his legacy and prove that his name deserves to be mentioned alongside Michael Jordan.
And of all teams, you got to be connected here against this Golden State Warriors team. And, you know, you see all three of those. We always say that, you know, with Golden State, the luxury is, you know, only two guys of their big three have to play well. Well, they all played well.
Right.
and when that happens and they score 100-some points, it's going to be a long night.
Well, the place went nuts again tonight because of Steph Curry's exploits, and it had plenty of reason to, because he goes for an NBA Finals record, 9 made threes in 17 attempts for his 33 tonight, a game high as the Warriors.
Very happy to see Steph Curry finally putting to rest this notion that he does not play well in the finals. In actuality, he's only not played well in one finals, that being the 2016 finals, where he came up short mentally and also due to that debilitating knee injury that he never fully recovered from in the 2016 playoffs. But there's no doubt in my mind, in Game 3, something very mysterious happened to him where he seemed to switch off. So I have no problem with people giving him flack over that season's playoffs, because he wasn't good. But he was very good in the 2015 finals, and many people forget how great he was in the 2015 playoffs until he suffered that almost horrific injury against the Houston Rockets where he fell on his neck. And he was not quite the same after he came back from that fall. For those of you who remember, he toppled over somebody's shoulders. I'm trying to remember who it was. It may have been Trevor Ariza. He landed on his neck. He left the game, came back, was shooting air balls, and then I believe he came back in Game 5, struggled. Then the finals came. Game 1, he shot okay. Game 2, he was terrible. And then the narrative started about how Dellavedova was shutting him down in Games 2 and 3. The fourth quarter of Game 3, he started to heat up, and that carried over into Games 4 and 5. Game 5, he went nuclear, and then Game 6, they were able to close it out. But for that series, he averaged 26.5 points, 6 assists, and 6 rebounds. He should have won the MVP. But the media was already starting to get tired of the Steph Curry narrative in regards to him being the MVP. So they found someone to give it to. They gave it to Iguodala. even though to me, Curry deserved it that year. In last year's finals, as an all-around player, he was actually better than Kevin Durant. He was playing elite-level defense in the finals, and he almost averaged a triple-double. I believe his numbers were something like 27, 9, and 8. Now, had he had the mindset of a LeBron James, he would have been highly aware of the numbers that he was averaging, and he would have purposefully went out and tried to average a triple-double.
The Warriors run away with it, led by as many as 23 on their way to a 19-point win.
It's definitely good to see him kill this narrative, though, and this will be his finals MVP year. I think that Durant came out in Game 1, once again trying to prove a mano-a-mano point with LeBron James. He did not shoot well, and I think that in Game 2, his overall mentality was different. I think that he realized, okay, this is Curry's year, because I truly believe that Durant was cognizant of the potentiality that he could win his second straight finals MVP award against LeBron, and he wanted that initially for his legacy. But then when he realized how aggressive Curry was playing, and it kind of brought into focus the fact that Curry welcomed him onto that team, which is his franchise. So I believe that he's divested a little bit of the mental investment that he was making in trying to be the finals MVP, and I think he's ready to acquiesce it to Curry. And I think Curry's going to take it anyway.
Well, just an unbelievable shooter who got hot at the right time. And then knowing that Kevin Love is on him, who's playing cautious defense. He's not defending him, he's cautiously defending him. All of these plays, these guys are just saying, I just want to put a hand up.
Curry's release is just way too fast for him to be guarded out there like that, especially when he's in his bag. When he feels healthy and his handle is sharp, he's impossible to guard because he literally steps back at the 28-foot mark.
The hand up. They're not saying, I'm going to force him left, I'm going to force him shoot, greatest shooter of all time.
Kyle Kuzma thinks so.
I think, I won't go there yet. I'll say it's close. But
close to who, dude? The only person that we could possibly question as being the shooter that Steph Curry is today in the NBA's history is Larry Bird. That's it. When you talk about Reggie Miller and Ray Allen, those players were more catch-and-shoot players. They did not shoot off the dribble on the level of Steph Curry. Steve Nash was extremely proficient, but he was not as prolific as Steph. The only player that I would match up with Curry in regards to him possibly being a better shooter than Curry all around is Larry Bird. He could shoot going left, he could shoot going right, he could shoot over his right shoulder, over his left shoulder. He had range. Of course, he was a great free throw shooter as well.
But when you have a big on you, they have to play you cautiously. So they're saying, my goal is to just put a hand in your face. But when you have a perimeter defender on you, he's saying, I'm going to make him go a certain way, which in turn makes your shot a little bit more difficult. So to me, to switch every single time allows Steph to know that the defense is being cautious. So now the defense is really on a defensive back pedal. They're not being aggressively defensive. And
they can't be aggressively defensive. It's going to cause too much of a loss of energy for their most important player, that being Mr. LeBron James.
And I don't think that's a steady diet that you can win any kind of champ.
That's why Houston was able to play so aggressively on defense, because they had the confidence with Chris Paul that even if James Harden were to get tired, they could let Chris Paul take over the offense.
Championship with.
Yeah, and the switches occurred with the big man that he has superior foot speed over. So it wasn't like the bigs that were switching out on him could keep up with his foot speed. And then with his ball handling ability, there was no help situations. And that's the thing that I found a little disheartening tonight from a competitive standpoint. And this is why I say, like, Cleveland's defense tonight was very selfish. Normally we talk again about offensive players being selfish, but I thought defensively they were very selfish in not helping each other and leaving each other in very uncomfortable positions. And the bigs was out on the island a lot, and frankly, very embarrassing positions.
Well, Isiah Thomas, you're saying a lot there, brother, but you're not bringing it home. And we both know why you're not bringing it home. Because LeBron James has been the horse that you've been riding over the last couple of years to see if you could diminish in any way Michael Jordan's legacy. Let's keep it funky right now, bro. But you see the same things that I see. LeBron James, though a great player, at this point, really only plays on one side of the basketball court. He's not willing to play defensively unless it's one of his illustrious chase down blocks. That's pretty much the only time that he wants to play on defense. He's terrible in one-on-one situations. When is the last time that anyone saw LeBron James keep a player in front of him on defense? He cannot slide his feet anymore. Why is that? He's too muscle-bound. Whatever it is that the biochemist is giving him is slowing down his lateral movement, his lateral footwork. And I know for a fact that Isiah Thomas understands that the reason why the help defense was so poor is because they all had to make sure that not only did they just partially show in regards to their help, but that they got back to their man as soon as possible because they had no confidence that LeBron James was going to pick up the slack on defense.
Positions and teammates did not come to help.
Let's get in.
So anyway, that's it on this issue in regards to the defense that was played by the Cleveland Cavaliers and what I believe Mr. Isiah Thomas was trying to imply by many of his cryptic statements. Because if you notice, he was pretty much the only person on the panel who did not get truly specific in regards to many of his criticisms of the Cleveland Cavaliers defense. He was just basically highlighting the fact that their big men were left on an island. But he was not getting into the nitty-gritty. He was not getting meticulous in regards to why that was occurring. But he knows why. But he can't say it because none of the major media entities involved with the NBA are truly allowed to criticize LeBron James anymore, other than Skip Bayless. But anyway, peace.